from Excel Health. I want to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Rowe to the program. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
My first time talking to you, but Bree's talked to you before. So we're going to talk about your spinal surgeries and what your practice does. What does it primarily do there?
So we take care of conditions related to spinal aging.
Okay.
So meaning that with all moving parts, your joints and your discs,
right,
they all wear down at some point. Mm-hmm. So it's very similar to what happens with your car.
Right.
So
if you think of the tire tread as cartilage, it wears down to like, oh, we got problems here.
That's exactly right. So it'd be like, the tire tread's wearing down, or your brake pad's wearing down, and your oil kind of getting a little bit low. So what do you do when you have a problem like that?
Well, my dipstick hasn't touched oil for a long time, I'll tell you that now.
Yeah, I remember the day when we used to do that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
But like we typically recommend getting tune-ups, because we're not saying that you can actually reverse the effects of aging, but there are new cutting-edge technologies that will now allow us to sort of slow down the process of aging and also help with the things that may sort of impede a person from actually living their normal lives. And specifically, I'm talking about in the spine, neural compression, or anything related to pinching of the nerve. You've probably heard the term sciatica.
Right, oh yeah.
So a sciatic nerve is a large nerve that goes in the back of the leg, and it's really a confluence of the lower lumbar and upper sacral nerve roots going down into the leg. And so when a patient experiences compression of those nerves, they can get a feeling of the nerve pain
shoots down my leg?
Shooting right down that leg.
Okay.
So when you have that type of neurologic type of feeling, it typically means that the nerves are getting pinched. And so what we can do is go in there with an ultra minimally invasive outpatient procedure in order to take the pressure off the nerves.
Now, how is your approach different than a typical maybe spine surgery or something like that approach at another doctor's office?
Sure, and that's how we all kind of trained as either during our medical school or residency or fellowship. The most traditional way of actually approaching the spine is an open approach.
Okay.
And what that means is you literally open up the spine. And I don't know if you've ever filleted a fish before.
that does not sound fantastic in terms of a comparison.
It's very similar to what traditional open spine surgery is, meaning that historically, because spine surgeons would need to look at the spine, because we didn't have anything to magnify the appearance of the spine, you'd have to make a big open incision and literally fillet open the spine, and then perform a procedure called a laminectomy. And a laminectomy is, historically, that's what we used to do for patients with stenosis or pinching of the nerves. But now we have very sophisticated ways of putting in high-definition cameras through tiny little incisions.
Okay, that was getting my next question.
Yes.
How are you doing without being able to see? Because this is a very fine kind of a surgery. This isn't just like I think I'm in the right spot. When we're talking about your spine, your nerves running down there, and your ability to be able to walk and move around.
That's exactly right. So instead of using our eyes directly to look at the patient's spine, we can actually make these tiny little poke incisions and put in these high-definition cameras in order to actually see the spine underneath the skin.
Why does the incision size make a big difference? If it's a small incision versus maybe one just a little bit larger, what is in terms of recovery or pain or what's going on there?
Yeah, so the size of the incision reflects sort of what we call the iatrogenic injury that we do in getting down into the spine. And before, we just didn't have any other way to do it. We just didn't know any other method to go into the spine that was less destructive. But using these less invasive techniques, we can actually go in there without having to disrupt the normal soft tissues that are there, meaning that the tendons and ligaments and the soft tissue structures that are supposed to help support the spine, you don't disrupt them. So it's much better for the patient at the end of the day.
So if I come in there as a patient and maybe I'm having sciatica, I'm having some lower back pain, how do I know I'm a candidate for a procedure that you can do as opposed to maybe a different surgery altogether?
Sure. So, the evolution of these type of techniques is really similar to what's happened in other surgical fields. Like if you had a gallbladder that was inflamed, or you had an appendix that was inflamed that needed to be taken out. So the gold standard now is laparoscopic, where you make a tiny little incision, you put a camera in there, and the surgeon will then do their work.
Right.
Before, it wasn't like that. So I actually did a general surgery internship. And during my training, we did mini open or open surgery or laparotomies. And the same thing with like sports medicine. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, but I primarily do spine surgery. But my colleagues in sports medicine, historically, they would make big open incisions to look at the joints. But now they can actually put in tiny little cameras into the joints. And it's much better because it's all outpatient after that.
Now you say it's outpatient. So what is the recovery time? If I go in on a Tuesday morning and am I walking Tuesday afternoon?
Yes. You're walking in and you're walking out.
Wow. And what about inflammation, aftercare? Can I start playing basketball the next day?
No. We don't recommend that. You know. But what we do recommend is that you walk in, have the procedure, and most of the procedures last maybe 1 or 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then you're in the recovery room for about another hour, and then you just walk out from there. But we do recommend just kind of take it easy for the first month. So you can do all the walking that you want to do, and then at 1 month we start some physical therapy. And then slowly start getting the patient back to their normal activities after that.
So it's a process. You're walking, you're okay, you're pretty much all right, but you're in the limit for the first month or so in terms of just making sure that everything heals right. And what do the post-operative kind of checks back with you look like?
Yeah, so the first thing that we'll do is we'll do a wound check to make sure that the incisions are healing okay. And to tell you quite honestly, because of the fact that we make these tiny little incisions, there's very little blood loss. The chance for infection are very, very low because of the fact that we're not really exposing the everything underneath the skin. And so we typically tell our patients, like the day after the procedure, you can start taking a shower, for instance. And then after that, you can do all the walking that you normally do, as much as you could potentially tolerate. And then they come back to us, typically within the first 2 to 4 weeks for a wound check. So we just take a look at the incision and then do a neuro check to make sure that neurologically they're doing okay. And then at 1 month, we start some physical therapy. And then we typically see them back at 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years, depending on what type of surgery that they have.
And what's the age range in terms of, like you said, there's this wear and tear on your body? What's the average, as we get to what age do we start thinking, hey, I'm having some pain to the point where I'm going to maybe need a procedure like this?
It can be as early as your teens if for instance, you have disc herniation or you have scoliosis that you are born with. But typically, most of our patients are somewhere in their sort of 40s to 50s. And historically, we didn't even think about operating on patients that were in their 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s. But what's happened now is that because of the fact that we're doing these procedures less invasively, it's opening up opportunities. Because if you can think about that, if you have medical conditions that sort of preclude you from having big open surgery, where there's a lot of blood loss, and a lot of postoperative pain and disability, and you're in the hospital for several days to a few weeks, that can be very, very demanding on someone with a lot of medical issues. But because of the fact that we've really taken this spectrum from this open to ultra minimally invasive endoscopic, that's getting to the point where we're getting close to doing what's considered needle-based procedures with some non-surgical colleagues, our pain management specialists. They typically do most of their procedures with a needle, but we're getting to that point where it's almost becoming equivalent to that.
Is when I get this surgery, or someone comes in and gets this surgery, can they expect this to be the end all for some back pain or those issues, or do you find, okay, well now it's recurring, and and the ones above that or below that, or we need to kind of like have a tune-up?
That's an excellent question. So historically, when you had open surgery, you disrupt the soft tissues above and below, you typically do find issues at those adjacent levels. And also, if you have a fusion where you're putting in instrumentation, that will lead to issues above and below. But typically now, because we're doing these ultra minimally invasive procedures, we're really doing more decompressions, where we're taking the pressure off the nerves through procedures called laminotomies, where we create a little sunroof in the spine, or foraminotomies, where we're just essentially roto-rootering the areas where the nerves exit. And so this allows for the normal processes with respect to the healing to occur, and so it doesn't disrupt what might happen above and below. Now, that doesn't mean that we're stopping the aging process.
Right, of course not, yeah. But you're at least you're relieving the results of those processes and giving your people a little bit more of a lifespan, extended warranty, so to speak, on their spine.
Exactly, and that's what the tune-up is really. That analogy of having a tune-up is very, very accurate, because historically, I think people thought about really doing some big procedures like body work. If you had some issues, multiple issues with an antique car, typically, the best way to actually do is to keep it up normally with tune-ups, and so that's the approach that we take.
Yeah, and I think people when they hear about spinal surgery, they think of the rods and the pins and those things that used to be a big part of what those surgeries were. That's all there was. But now it's a lot different with this minimally invasive process.
Correct, and it's not that you cannot use those technologies.
Right, if need be.
If need be, but only if you need, because what's happening now is because we're finding out that these approaches, these less invasive approaches that can be done on an outpatient basis, less is better, less is more. So we get the biggest bang for a buck by just going in there, taking the pressure off the nerves and helping them with the sciatica and hopefully with the back pain as well.
Fantastic. Dr. Jeffrey Rowe from XL Health. If you have some inquiries, folks, make sure you contact them on the phone number there on your screen and the website. Dr. Rowe, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You're watching This Day. We'll be right back.